Okay, I'm HILDA Palmer. I'm the coordinator at the Greater Manchester Hazards Centre and the acting chair of the National Hazards Campaign, and I run a group called Families Against Corporate Killers for the families of people who have had somebody killed by their employer's gross negligence. And I'm obviously very interested in the Grenfell disaster because we think this is a result of a long process of the deregulation and slashing of the enforcement of health and safety and the undermining of health and safety that has actually led to this terrible event which never should have happened. I think we need to make the Grenfell disaster an enough is enough moment. People are dying at work every day in ones and twos. People are dying at home from illnesses caused by work. People are being injured on an absolutely phenomenal scale. But it's very hidden and private. What happened at Grenfell, which is due to the same deregulatory enforcement slashing, undermining of the concepts that good health and safety and social protection, is a good thing. And that's all being undermined, but Grenfell showed that very clearly, very publicly, in an absolutely horrendous way that can't be ignored. And I think part of getting justice for the people at Grenfell, people who are involved in that, and for everybody, is to actually make this an enough is enough moment where we actually say the whole deregulation and putting business and employers and corporation profits above people's lives and health has gone too far. It must be stopped. It must be reversed. Well, the families have to be supported in every way we possibly can. We have to support them to get proper legal representation and to be key participants in every stage. So they must be properly informed about the progress of the investigation, and we want that investigation to be as thorough and deep and wide as it possibly can be. We've already written to Commander Stuart Cundy saying we would like the Prime Ministers and Ministers responsible for promoting deregulation, for ignoring warnings on fire safety particularly, but by bleating and boasting about cutting health and safety regulations. We want them to be interviewed under caution. We want evidence to be sought. Can they bring the highest possible charges? Corporate manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter, major health and safety offences against people in the council, people of all the companies involved in the renovation, people who are involved in signing off on it. Absolutely anybody and everybody who was involved in that has to be looked at properly. But we want the responsibility to be pushed as high up as it can. We don't want just people at the bottom, the lower people, to actually end up taking the fall for this, because that won't be justice. But we also want then the public inquiry to be again broad and deep and thorough, and we want that's got to examine the whole environment of deregulation and enforcement slashing and how that led to something like this happening, whereby you've got companies actually making flammable crap, I'm not going to give it any grander term than that, to slap on the outside of buildings, and where people are treated absolutely appallingly. We've got to go to the top, and again the residents have got to be absolutely involved in that, and we want lots of interested parties, people like ourselves, the Hazards Campaign, Hazards Magazine, and criminologists like Dave White and Steve Toombs, and people who've been looking at health and safety regulation and enforcement for many, many years, to be involved as interested parties. We cannot trust anybody who's involved in this process. They got us into this mess. They're responsible for the killings at Grenfell. We are going to have to be on their backs the whole time and make sure that those who are culpable are identified and that then they're held accountable and that we get as much justice as we possibly can. And obviously we've got to sort out fire safety, review the building regulations using the experience of all the fire safety reps and the FBU like Matt Rack, people who know what the problems are. But solving fire safety without actually changing the whole system of health and safety regulation I don't think will be enough. And really it's about saying what sort of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where people at work, particularly those lower down the scale, the lower your wages, the more at risk you are of dying, being injured or made ill, and those are the same people who are living in poor social housing or very poor, exorbitantly priced private rented accommodation. It's the same people, we're talking about the same people. We don't want a world where those people's health and lives matters less than corporate profits. Thanks very much. Hazards Campaign, Hazards Magazine, Families Against Corporate Killers, Dave White and Steve Toombs and many others here and many of you out there have probably been campaigning and saying for years that a lack of good health and safety and the deregulation of health and safety kills
It's killing at work, it has been doing for years, and it is going to go on and kill more. We've been saying that, and people haven't been listening to us. I wear my slogan on my chest here, we love red tape because it's better than bloody bandages. And that should be obvious, self-evident, it is evidenced. It's better to have bloody bandages than dead bodies. Should be obvious, but it absolutely isn't, and they absolutely are not listening to us. And this is true at work, at home, and in the environment. Joe was right to talk about Labour, the Labour Party and Labour governments being as implicated in this and having blood on their hands as much as the Tory government. I think we must remember that neoliberal governments for the last 40 years have been deregulation. Deregulation is central to neoliberalism, and we had Thatcher's bonfire of regulations, and her deregulation then became Brown and Blair's better regulation, was exactly the same sort of thing. Light touch, limited touch, flexible, the most flexible workforce in Europe. Do you remember Blair boasting about that? I'm sure he will be very pleased about its culmination in the foul gig economy, which is devastating workers' lives and health at the moment. And then we come to Cameron in 2010, who ramped it all up with his claiming health and safety was a monster, an albatross around the neck of business. And in 2012, he made it his New Year's resolution to kill off health and safety culture forever. And they did huge amounts of damage in that period in the coalition, that 5-year term. And in the 2015, the Tory General Election Manifesto confirmed that deregulation was still a priority, better regulation, getting better and better, which Steve Toombs has written about very brilliantly. Where does that end logically? He's written a paper called Better Regulation, Better for Whom? And then we had the Brexit referendum, and Theresa May came to power and again reconfirmed that deregulation and deregulation of health and safety was a very big thing for her, although she did talk about addressing burning inequalities. I think we can just dwell on that a little. We sent her a postcard saying, stop it, you're killing us, and urging her to look at health and safety. We got the most anodyne letter back, which we will submit to the public inquiry as part of our evidence, really. And now we have Brexit, and whatever you voted and why ever you voted, whether you voted in or out, I think we must all be aware that Brexit is seen by the Brexiteers, people like Oliver Letwin, as another excuse to deregulate, and they've been very, very clear about that. And he set up a new red tape challenge, and a group that he organised on building materials and building regulations was actually convened on the day of the Grenfell fire, and they were looking at how they could get rid of more health and safety regulations controlling the use of materials like the cladding and the insulation and everything like that. They claimed that on that day they didn't actually decide to reduce any, but I wonder what they would have done if Grenfell hadn't happened that morning. So when I saw the Grenfell fire, I was horrified, saddened, angry as hell, but I wasn't entirely surprised, because Grenfell is the result of the deregulation that we've been seeing over the last 40 years, and particularly over the last 7 years. It's about the discarding of critical fire, building, products and environmental and workplace health and safety protection, both the laws and their enforcement. It wasn't a one-off, it's not an accident, but an incident that was foretold by the residents, forewarned by fire experts, the FBU, the all-party parliamentary group, and it was foreseeable and utterly preventable, and it should have been. Caused directly by government policies. Cameron called for a bonfire of red tape, and Grenfell was his obscene bonfire of real people. In Scotland, they actually did listen to the warnings after fires. In England, they didn't listen to Sam Webb and other people's suggestions after the Lacknell fire and actually review the building regs and do something about it. But in Scotland, after the Irvine fire, when some people died in I think, Ayrshire, they did actually review their building regulations and change them, which is why there haven't been any deaths in high-rise buildings in Scotland, and none of their cladding panels, I think, have come up as being flammable. I agree with John McDonnell and Steve and Dave and other people use this term social murder. I agree that the deaths of the people at Grenfell is social murder, or maybe it's state murder, state terrorism. At work, workers die usually in ones and twos, invisibly. Nobody really knows about them. Occasionally they die in larger numbers. But again, most of you probably won't have heard of them, I'm sure. How many people know that 2 years ago this week, 4 people died in Bosley in a wood flour mill which had been taken over by an incompetent employer who allowed wood dust to build up, and most of you will know that if dust builds up and in the right combinations it can become explosive. It exploded and 4 people were killed, many, many more were injured. The whole community was utterly devastated. One of the workers was vaporised and has never actually been found. And Didcot, where workers were demolishing a boiler house of the Didcot power station, and they were under the structure, 10 stories high, full of loads and loads of metal, tons and tons of it, and they were cutting the uprights to weaken them, preparatory to explosively demolishing them, and the building came down. 4 workers were killed, 1 was found right away, 3 workers were under 38,000 tonnes of rubble for 6 months before they found them. But mostly, workers die in incidents at work, relatively invisibly. They become injured and nobody really hears about them. They die of illnesses caused by their work, at home, in hospital, in hospices, and nobody really knows about them. Grenfell has changed all of that in the sense that it was public, it was visible, and the Grenfell survivors are making sure that we know all about it and everybody's getting behind us. Even the tabloids were talking about deregulation having gone too far. So, deregulation attacks on health and safety, they're all based on lies and propaganda backed up by the corporate tabloid press. I think it's really, really incredible to see the tabloid press actually talking about health and safety in a positive way for a short period. But the Daily Mail had a cover with a picture of Grenfell on it and said, how did this happen? How did it bloody happen, Daily Mail? Because you spent your whole time pouring out poison about how health and safety is completely useless and stupid and we should get rid of it. How do they do this? We've had endless reviews of health and safety, endless reviews. Hampton reviews under Blair and Brown, the Lord Young review, which wasn't worth the paper it was written on, was based on no evidence at all and was just particularly made up under Cameron. We've had other reviews about all of this, but they're always on biased terms. They're never, let's see how good health and safety is, how we can make it better, how we can stop people being killed, how we can stop people being made ill. They're always based on the fact that it's a truth that health and safety regulation is a burden on business, it's unnecessarily stupid and we must get rid of it. Never about how is it a social good, what is the value of it, it's a moral imperative not to kill and injure people. That is never the case, so they're always biased. Some of the lies it's based on as well is that modern work, modern life, it's very little harm now. People say, not many people get killed at work. Well, they actually do. At least 1,200 people are killed in incidents at work every year. About 50,000 people die of illnesses caused by their work. 620,000 people are injured. About 2 million minimum are made ill every year. That's out of a workforce of 32 million. But just think about that. The higher the risk, the further you go down the pay scale, the lower your wages, the higher your risk. So most of those figures are actually borne by the bottom half or third or quarter. And so it's very, very unevenly borne. And work is becoming, how much is that? Work is becoming more stressful and making people really, really ill. We've had all this nonsense about it's just red tape and conkers, bonkers and all the rest of it. Employers will do the right thing. Well, we know that's absolute rubbish. Sam Webb has said about the whole cladding and insulation stuff and what's going on the outside of buildings. He said it's like wrapping aluminium foil around a firelighter, slapping it on the outside of the buildings and hoping for the best. Health and safety is not a burden on business. It's only a burden on excessive profits. And it costs an enormous amount. Poor health and safety costs between 30 and 60 billion. The people who pay that cost are the people who are hurt or killed, their families are people who are killed. But even so, the individuals pay 57% of the financial cost. We pay 24%, and the employers who cause that only pay 19%. So what do we want now? We've got to keep Grenfell in the public eye. We've got to make sure that we support the families and we get as much justice as we possibly can for them. We want as broad an investigation as possible. We have asked for ministers and prime ministers to be interviewed under caution. We want corporate manslaughter and gross negligence manslaughter and high-level health and safety charges to be brought if they can find the evidence, and Steve's going to talk a bit about that. And we want to keep pushing the responsibility, the accountability and the culpability up to the top. And we also want the inquiry to be as broad as it possibly can and look at the whole deregulatory framework in which Grenfell happened. And basically we need independent, fully funded health and safety enforcers with health, safety and welfare as their primary and only goal. Not at the moment, where they have to actually consider the impact, they have a growth duty on them, and they have to consider the impact of their regulation for health and safety on the growth and development of those businesses. Thanks very much.